Greg Frank, the Credit Educator, here with Superior Credit Care, teaching you all about your credit score. Now, most people have heard of the FICO score, but I find that a lot of people don't really understand what exactly FICO is. So let's clear that up for you. FICO stands for the Fair Isaac Corporation, and it actually has no direct connection to either the credit bureaus or the credit industry in general. Instead, FICO was started in the 1950s by two gentlemen, Bill Fair, an engineer, and Earl Isaac, a mathematician. And they started the company on the premise that access to data, if used intelligently, would help businesses make better decisions. So they were actually kind of ahead of their time. So what does that have to do with credit scoring? Well, let's go back in history to, say, the 1950s, because way back then, the credit bureaus operated in absolute total secrecy. If you were denied for a loan, you did not have the right to see your credit file. In fact, banks were strictly forbidden from sharing that information with consumers. Also, during that time period, there was a lot of discriminatory lending being practiced. Remember, we didn't have the big giant mega banks back then. The country had lots and lots of very small local and regional banks, and virtually every bank had their own lending criteria. So what would be acceptable for one bank was completely not acceptable for another, and there was a lot of discriminatory lending being practiced. You could be denied a loan on the basis of your age, your gender, your nationality or ethnic background, or sometimes if they just didn't like the neighborhood you lived in. So around the 1960s, the government started to get involved, and they started looking to regulate the banking industry. Enter the FICO people. What they did was they created a statistical analysis model that would measure your credit risk or credit worthiness at any point in time. Specifically, it was designed to measure the odds of you becoming delinquent or defaulting on a loan. Now, it's a very complex system, but the basis behind it is a lot of information gets entered into their model, which analyzes it and slices and dices it in thousands of different ways and spits out a number. The higher that number, the lower the risk. It's really, really that simple. So again, what the FICO people did was they introduced this model to the lending industry and eventually started licensing their software to the credit bureaus, who each now use their own variation of the FICO model. So that is what your FICO score is, and hopefully now you have a greater understanding.